With WesternUnion.com's 4-star rated mobile app, send money fast virtually anywhere for just about anything. Download the free Western Union mobile app today from iTunes or the Play Store, or visit WesternUnion.com to learn more.
Can you feel it?
Durant for three, bingo! Right down the chute, Kevin Durant.
NBA Lockdown with Bruce Bowen.
Gets it to James. Here's a three for the win. Good! It is good!
The NBA Lockdown podcast with Bruce Bowen. Along with three-time NBA champion Bruce Bowen, here's ESPN.com NBA columnist Israel Gutierrez.
Welcome into another edition of the NBA Lockdown podcast. It is conference finals time with Bruce Bowen. I'm Israel Gutierrez. We will start off by seeing how the West Conference Finals sets up when Oklahoma City defeated the LA Clippers.
Granger's three is off the mark. Collison to follow. That rolls off. 104-98. Final score. The Oklahoma City Thunder beat the Los Angeles Clippers in the Western Conference semifinals 4-2. And now move into the Western Conference Finals on Monday and a date against the San Antonio Spurs.
That was the great Kevin Calabro on ESPN Radio calling the end of the 104-98 Oklahoma City Thunder win. They won that series 4-2. I think a lot of people thought it would go 7. LA Clippers on their home floor with plenty of reason to be motivated after that Game 5 loss and how it ended controversially. There's a couple places this game sort of takes us, Bruce. And I'm going to start with the Clippers here because – a lot of people are having this conversation about Chris Paul. He's been in the league, 9 years now? Does not have a conference finals appearance, and people are using that to judge him as a player. And I think that's ridiculous. I think it's kind of maddening when you think about it because, on one side of your mouth, people say, hey, one man doesn't make a team. On the other side, it's like, hey, this one man can't take a team to a conference finals. I'm with Chris Paul here. No great player has ever said, at least I made a conference finals. No, it's all about winning a championship. His team wasn't there yet, or his team could be championship caliber. They just got beat by another championship caliber team. Help me dismiss this idea that Chris Paul is not as good as everybody thinks he is because he has yet to reach a conference finals. Please help.
Well, Izzy, you have to trust what you see. Izzy, all the years that you've been covering the game and covering Chris Paul, you know what type of elite, I say again, elite point guard he is in this game. It's just unfortunate that, it's not up to one individual. It's just not. I mean, you have to take into account he's in one of the toughest divisions to get to a Western Conference Finals first and foremost. And then secondly, I think they've continued to grow in the process of changing the culture in Los Angeles. I think this was part of the reason why he was so wanted in L.A. because of his leadership qualities, because he could change the perception of a group and start to really infect his teammates with the type of mentality that he has, which is a winner's mentality. Unfortunately, he hasn't gotten a chance to get there just yet, but it doesn't mean that you write him off and say that he's not an elite player, because he definitely is he? With the fact that the Clippers were a team prior to Chris Paul getting there. They're a team that no one really cared about. They didn't care about because people knew that the guys on the Clippers team, they were just there to enjoy the weather and speed through the NBA season and leave it at that. Well, now, we've never thought of a team taking the attention away from the Lakers. Now, I know the Lakers got a lot to do with it as well as far as being as bad as they are right now, but they've earned the right to really be talked about in the city of L.A., Lob City. It's just so funny to me that people will try and equate someone's worth by where they end up. I never heard that about Steve Nash. He hasn't won a championship. He may have been to some finals, conference finals, but I mean, he was an elite point guard in his prime as well. So it's not just about one guy. It's a team. And as you continue to build that team, you just continue to move on in the right direction.
Real quick, here's Doc Rivers on his point guard, Chris Paul.
He's the spirit of our team, and right now his spirit is broken. He's going to have all summer to work and get ready for next year, but he'll be back. He'll be better next year. He knows me now. He knows our system now. I just feel bad for him because he's the guy that always, puts everything on his shoulders, and I'm sure he will this summer.
I don't necessarily feel bad for Chris Paul. I just think, it's a tough situation. Like, everybody can't win a title. You can't just start handing them out to players that you think deserve it. Obviously Charles Barkley never won one. Patrick Ewing never won one. Were we all questioning their abilities as players as they were getting there just because he didn't get to a conference finals? Again, this was his first year under Doc Rivers. This team is probably not complete. I mean, first of all, look at the box score. You had Matt Barnes going 4-14. That didn't really help. Your bench wasn't spectacular. J.J. Redick didn't shoot the ball particularly well, and you got guys in foul trouble. Blake Griffin fouled out. Redick fouled out. So, let's look at who they lost to. And they lost to Kevin Durant, who got on a hot streak in the second half, finished with 39 and 16. Are we supposed to knock Chris Paul because he can't do the things that Kevin Durant does? No, they're two different types of players. And even Kevin Durant will tell you Chris Paul is in the same category as him in terms of elite players in the league. So, it's ridiculous to question him in particular. So rather than spend more time on that, we'll move forward to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder and how they did this. Bruce, you watched that game in that first half, and you're like, okay, well, the Thunder's fighting. They're kind of doing, what they need to do to keep the game close every once in a while to keep you interested. But it didn't feel like a game they were going to win, especially with Russell Westbrook struggling mightily from the field the way he was. He was dishing it pretty well with 12 assists and got to the free throw line 12 times, but he turned the ball over 5 times and was 4 of 15, and you're thinking, all right, well, this is going to go to a Game 7 like we all thought it would. Mm-hmm. And then Kevin Durant just kind of goes nuts and does what Kevin Durant can do. He can turn a horrible-looking game into a brilliant game just by catching fire. And, he had those couple threes where there was one in particular where J.J. Redick left him open, and it seemed to open the floodgates. And that, to me, was, as many strong performances as he's had in these playoffs so far, that to me was his best because it came on the road, it came in a closeout game, and it came despite Russell Westbrook struggling. So, I mean, I don't even know what to ask you here, Bruce, other than to help me shower praise on Kevin Durant and this team and how quality a performance that was on the road.
I think this is a great educational piece, Izzy, as far as, the elite level of where Kevin Durant is. He is an MVP, and you see it time and time again where they are struggling, and then all it takes is one shot. And next thing you know, they're looking like that player that we've known them to be for quite some time. And that's where, we talked about this in our last podcast, how I talked about where when I came out of the game, and if there was a guy who hadn't gotten into a rhythm, I was really, emphatic on saying to Manu sometimes, hey, don't let them get an easy one. Because I think if they get an easy one, they're so accustomed to doing this. So when it's easier for them, now it takes away the doubt that they may have. And you saw it in Kevin's body language before in the games where he wants to do well and he's not doing well and he kind of slumps his shoulders and he gets down on himself. As a player, that's where I want him to stay, because I know that when he gets that bounce, when he has that other look in his eyes where nothing that a particular defender can do will affect him, I know that he's going to be on. Now, in the fact that he is on, Izzy, you can't allow him to catch and shoot with all that time. You have to stay into, and that's what I think sometimes what happens to players, especially this group that Doc has, and he's trying to, this is just the first year for Doc, but they did really well to get to where they were. But this is where the learning process happens. You cannot be off of Kevin Durant. Even if he's 3 for 26, you must guard him like he's 12 for 12. But kudos to Kevin. This is where he can reflect. Hey, I was having a tough series against Memphis. I got it going again. And it's those types of moments that players, they reflect on. And because they reflect, they tend to respond because they've been there before. And so this is just a little bump in the road. I'll get over it. Having that confidence is what allows elite players to continue to do those elite things that they're doing.
All right, so we know Kevin Durant's good. So how concerned are we about Serge Ibaka's calf injury? Obviously, we don't know the extent of it just yet. Left the game and, didn't return. Nick Collison replaced him and played pretty well, but without, you kind of need Serge Ibaka against the Spurs. You want as much athleticism as possible. how concerned are you just looking at it and just from, not, playing doctor, but just from your experience on a basketball court and seeing guys get hurt? Do you think it's something that would affect him largely going forward?
Well, I'm concerned because you never see Serge Ibaka asked to come out of a game.
Right.
Usually you see guys, I'll shake it off, but immediately he's like looking at the trainers like, I need to come out. And so, when you take what he brings to the game, he's a good mid-range shooter. He can rebound, and most importantly, he defends. He's an athletic defensive guy. So sometimes, you're looking at the next series, say with San Antonio, Tony Parker gets a pick and roll. He can switch and still kind of keep a hand up where Tony has to shoot over the extension of an arm or slide with him. That's the kind of athleticism he brings. He brings a great defensive presence along with Kendrick Perkins, the backside blocker. So I'm concerned from that standpoint of them trying to limit the effectiveness of others. But I do like the fact they do have Adams and Nick Collison to come in as well, especially Adams being so athletic. I don't like the fact he doesn't have as much experience as Serge does. So the concerns are not just on the offensive side, but the defense, because I think Serge is really an anchor for them on the defensive side.
Yeah, I think Serge needs to take his time a little bit, make sure he doesn't try to rush back just from Monday's game one, because, like you said, you've got Steven Adams and you've got Nick Collison, which are two very capable guys in the front court. If you remember, obviously San Antonio has home court. And if you remember, a couple of years ago, they lost the first two, won the next four. There's no real urgency to take that game one, especially if it's going to cost you the ability to play in the rest of the series. So Serge needs to, just be patient with it. Maybe even take from now till Wednesday for game two to be able to make his debut if that's the case, if it's one of those injuries that just needs a couple more days. But we should probably mention, given that we talked in the last podcast about Doc Rivers potentially not being fined, and then after we recorded it, he was fined $25,000 for his post-game rant after Game 5. It was reported that, or Doc Rivers said actually, that two Clippers employees volunteered to take payroll deductions to help him pay for the fine. It's very nice of them, but they don't make as much. They don't make Doc Rivers money, so I don't think they need to be doing that. But Doc said, I don't care about the fine. I thought it was deserved. It was one of the rare times where you actually earned one, and it's true. He got his money's worth out of that one with the pounding of the table. That was a memorable rant by Doc Rivers. But we're going to move on to the Pacers and the Wizards.
Everything's behind us. Like we said when we started the playoffs, 33-7 is behind us, means nothing. How we struggled down the stretch, took a lot of criticism, means nothing. And that's behind us. This is where we wanted to be. We want to get back to the conference finals and have a chance to move on.
Easy, Frank Vogel. Everything's behind you, sure. That includes the Washington Wizards, who lost in Game 6 on their home court, lost all three of their games at home in this series. This one came in 93-80 at the hands of the Pacers, who move on to the conference finals. However, it's not so much what's behind you, Frank Vogel, it's what's ahead of you. And we're not going to preview the conference finals just yet, but they have quite the task ahead of them. So, patting yourself on the back for just getting past these two teams is probably not the best way to go. I would say this. It was a team that looked like it was broken, and then you get Roy Hibbert back on board, and he looks like he's a contributor again. And that's step one. But I think the biggest key to this team recovering is it finding a sort of tier system, okay? It's finding the hierarchy and realizing who the leaders on this team are and who should be listened to. And I thought there was one exchange there where Paul George had turned the ball over, I think, with a behind-the-back pass, and on the ensuing Wizards possession, I think they got to the foul line, and David West basically just let him have it. He said, stop with that nonsense. Let's play a smart game. We're not trying to, be the Harlem Globetrotters here. That's not how we play. We play sound, fundamental basketball on the offensive end because we struggle. I'm not assuming he said all these things. It was a different conversation coming from David West. But, the message came across clear. We are a fundamental basketball team. We're not fancy. We struggle so much offensively. We have to make sure we value the ball and value the possessions. And he obviously had a good offensive game, David West did. So I think him being the voice of this team and the clear leader, I think, is the best possible scenario for these guys. And it was becoming more evident as this particular series went along.
And yes, you need a big brother like that out there on the floor, Izzy. You also need someone that you can go to. I think sometimes people get caught up in all the other things as far as guys that can take a lot of shots whenever they want to, as far as being the vocal leaders as well. But no, it was definitely clear that David West was saying, you know what, hey, if there's anything that needs to be done or said, I'm going to do it, because the last game we played against this team, we lost, and I wasn't nearly effective enough, not just from the standpoint of scoring, but being that leader on the floor. This is the same individual, Izzy, that we've noticed that has had huge games in their basically when they really needed to win on the road. In Atlanta, he hits a huge three, and he just took over down the stretch. Now, here in this game, he takes over, shooting that mid-range J, and then also knowing how to get to the block and also score down low as well. I think it's great for David West as far as his career is going. You look at all the trials and tribulations he's been through, Izzy. I'm really happy for him. It's just unfortunate that all the dysfunction that surrounded this ball club. But for the Indiana Pacers to have him, I know that Paul George gets a lot of credit and a lot of highlights, but they'd definitely be out of the playoffs had it not been for David West.
Yeah, and they would be a mess right now if they didn't have that defense that really defines them. And, for all the nonsense, we heard going on with this team and all the theories of what was going on in terms of in that locker room and, the up and down performances from Roy Hibbert and George Hill and Lance Stevenson, etc., that defense, because of the way they're built, like literally, the way they're built as human beings, with Roy Hibbert with that size and Paul George with those long arms and even George Hill with those long arms and Lance Stevenson with his quickness and athleticism, that defense was always there. We just didn't really recognize it as much because we thought, hey, Atlanta got hot shooting threes, or, they lost games that we didn't expect them to lose. But their opponents in 13 games in these playoffs are shooting 40.4%, okay? That is stellar defense. Even if you want to say it's against, a below 500 Hawks team and against a Washington Wizards team that was, a surprising second-round participant, you have to respect that defense. And, as we all know, they tend to play significantly better against Miami than they do against anybody else. So, they've got to feel good coming out of this series. And not only that, but the way they respond to the loss. Every time they've lost, they've won the next game. That's 5-0 so far after a loss in these playoffs. So before we get into the preview and the matchups against Miami, where do you think the frame of mind, like I mocked Vogel at the beginning jokingly, but where do you think their mindset should be going into these conference finals in terms of indeed having everything behind them and then just looking at their body of work so far?
Well, it's truly like golf. Golf is not about, how you go about getting that par. You can hit it to another fairway and still end up with a par, or you can hit it down the middle and end up with a par. And when we look at these, with the way that they play, they've hit it out of bounds, in the sand, in the water, taking drops, and they're still where they would like to be, especially as a number one seed. So it's really important for them to not even dwell on how they got here, but remember that it's so important to take care of business. This is what we've worked so hard for. How can we just put everything aside? We're not worried about how we got here, but the fact that we are here is what matters.
Dean. That's actually really good cross-sport analogy there. Doesn't matter how you scramble to get the par. As long as you get the par, that's all that matters.
There you go.
All right, on that note, we're going to let Bruce take a bow there while we take a break here. Conference finals matchups are set. What are we going to expect? We'll talk about it in just a minute.
ESPN Radio.
With the action on the court, the diamond, or the gridiron.
Comes alive.
The NBA.
The Miami Heat have won the 2013 NBA title.
Major League Baseball.
The Boston Red Sox have won the World Series.
The Bowl Championship Series.
The tide has risen again, the third time in 4 years.
You're home for the best in sports play-by-play.
ESPN Radio.
I'm already worried about Tony Parker and all their great players. You have to guard them. The good thing about it, they're only allowed to play 5 at the same time. We are too. So both teams are really good. Both teams play hard. Both teams have great experience, so it's going to be a great series.
Yes, please play that one.
I will.
Since I mocked Frank Vogel, I have to mock him.
Breaking down the rules of the game. With Scott Brooks. All right, here we go.
Bruce, 5 on 5. Your thoughts?
Okay.
All right, here we go. Starting with Vogel and Heat Pacers preview. 3, 2.
We're ready to go. I like the way we played in this series for the most part. Obviously, we have to adjust to another style of play. Nothing but the utmost respect for the champs. Excited to have another crack at it.
Look how confident Frank Vogel sounds. He's like, you guys tried to take my job away, and here I am in the conference finals again with home court this time. So take that, haters. Well, he didn't really say that, but that was Frank Vogel discussing the series upcoming with Miami. The regular season series was split 2 apiece. A home team won all 4 of the contests there. Really hard to use any of those as an evaluation of what to expect going forward, because first of all, the first 2 games happened, I believe, both in December, and then the last 2 games, there were dogfights, but the Pacers were in the middle of their sort of tailspin down the stretch, and yet again they still stepped up and played Miami well and won a 2-point contest, and in the finale in Miami, the Pacers were deep into their tailspin, and Miami ended up winning that one. So, having said everything we said about the Pacers and how good a position that they're in and how they should feel about after, dismissing the Hawks and Wizards and probably 2 more difficult a series than you would have anticipated a number 1 seed having, how do we see them going into this series against Miami? Because most people are going to say, oh, well, Miami can easily win one in Indiana, and they look like the better team so far, so we're going to pick Miami. But again, this matchup, you can't take one series and see what it looks like and then go ahead and project to the next series because matchups are so important. What are you looking for in this series, Bruce?
Well, I'm really looking to see how Indiana responds, with the mental preparation of the 2 series that they've had before. They've gone 7 games in 1 series against Atlanta. And yes, they stretched them out. They played a different style. I think you had Indiana worried more about personal things within their group as compared to things as far as a team concept. Then you go into Washington and playing against them. And, a little bit a hangover from Atlanta series, but still, I think the benefit of these 2 games, there are different ways that a team can prepare another team for the next round. And I think it's been more about the mental aspect of things for the Indiana Pacers and being able to make adjustments and do it in a way where eventually they figure it out. We talked about earlier how Atlanta stretched them with the 3-ball. Then you go against a team in Washington that's different than Atlanta as far as stretching the 3-ball, but you have a dynamic duo in the backcourt and Bradley Beal and John Wall. So it's different situations that prepare teams differently for the next round. So I say with Indiana, Izzy, it's more about the mental aspect of making adjustments and following through. Were they able to make the necessary adjustments and move forward in a rapid way? Maybe not as quick as people would have expected behind the season that they had earlier, but they were still able to do it. How will they bring all those things, all those trials and tribulations that they went through against Washington and Atlanta against the Heat? Because it's not hard to get up for the Heat. They've only been to the NBA Finals the past 3 seasons and they're back-to-back champions. So it's not about getting up for this group, but I think they can utilize all the mental anguish that they went through against Atlanta and Washington.
Here's what I think. I think this Pacers group just seems to do better with an underdog mentality. They seem to embrace the challenge of doing better than people expect them to do and don't nearly come up to meet the challenge as well when they're expected to do it. Like the whole first portion of the regular season when they dominated and had the best record in the league for such a long time, they were doing it with that underdog mentality. They were like, we have to get that number 1 seed. We have to have it because that's the only way we're going to beat the Miami Heat and get to the NBA Finals. And then once they looked like they were going to hang on to it and it wouldn't be a problem, then all of a sudden they're playing the favorites, and then things sort of went out of order. They weren't playing as hard. They weren't playing the same style of defense, and they just looked like a different team. Now, it's going to be interesting how they approach this because everybody's saying, well, not everybody, but a lot of people are suggesting, hey, the Heat should be the favorite. They're playing better basketball. The Pacers are the underdogs despite having home court advantage. That could play right into the Pacers' hands because if they're playing as if, they're playing with house money here, and frankly, you could say that they are, because I don't think Frank Vogel's job's in jeopardy anymore. I don't think they're going to undergo massive changes in the offseason in terms of player personnel. If they lose this series, they might make one significant move, but you would probably have to make that regardless of who you lose to. As long as you didn't make the NBA Finals, you think you have to improve. So I think that underdog mentality is going to really help this group, and it doesn't hurt either that they match up so well against Miami.
Yeah, you're right, and that is something, as far as the underdog mentality, it's less pressure on the underdog, Izzy. But I think, on the flip side, you got the home court. I think that's going to play a little mind game with them, because they're going to feel like they have to come out and be a certain way. Right. And they have not played well. They haven't played well at home thus far in the playoffs as far as first games. So it'll be interesting how they utilize, as I said, the other series, the other rounds prior to this, to kind of shore up things. Not necessarily motivate, because the motivation is there already, but now paying attention to detail. We got the heat coming in, fellas. We got to be on point with what we do. And so I think this only helps them because of the things that they've gone through against Washington and Atlanta.
All right, well, let's look at the other side of it here then with the Miami Heat, how they're going to be able to win this game, or win this series rather. And to me, I think they got a really good test going in with the Brooklyn Nets. And I don't mean a test in terms of a 5-game test. I just meant the style of play that Brooklyn plays. Like, they don't have the size. They didn't have the size that Indiana will have, but they did have the protect the paint at all costs mentality. So they tried to shrink the court, and they didn't tried anyway not to allow too much at the basket. What Miami did as a result was, the ball movement, at least in games, definitely in games 1, 2, and 5 in Miami, they definitely had the ball movement and, really beat that Nets defense. In Game 5, it took them to the second half to actually hit some of those open shots, but still, they trusted the ball movement, and that's what they're going to have to do against Indiana. Because if you try to, if the ball sticks and they can really zone in on any one particular offensive player, again, you're playing right into their hands. And if you go and try to finish against Roy Hibbert, you're going to have less success getting to the foul line, because, frankly, he's just going to block more shots than the Nets were capable of doing. So I think that setup, that really encouragement of ball movement that they had against Brooklyn is definitely going to help in this series. And I think you could just tell by the way they were playing, Bruce, especially LeBron early in games, that it was move the ball, get other guys involved. Outside of his 49-point game, actually both games in Brooklyn, where he started off hot in Game 3 and then had the 49-point game in Game 4. But even the 49-point game was more him getting to the rim. He had 11 makes in the paint. So I think that's still encouraging if you're Miami. But how much of a test do you think, or preparation rather, was that Brooklyn series for Indiana for Miami?
Well, it was a huge test, but preparation as well. I'm going to go just as an analogy I gave with Indiana. How does each round prepare you as far as for the next opponent? I thought it was a great test for the mental fortitude of Miami against the Charlotte Bobcats. It's not easy when you know that you're overmatched against a team, or I should say that you are the team that should move on. And if there are losses and things like that, how will you all respond? I thought in that situation it was so important for them to get to their secondary aspect of their offense and not try to win the series with the first 2 passes, or LeBron going crazy as he did in the regular season against Charlotte. So you get past them. Now you have a team that's a veteran team that's going to really try to limit all of the positives you have within your offense. So we talk about transition. We talk about the way that you all defend. They didn't turn the ball over so much. And so, in the game that they lost against Brooklyn in Brooklyn, I thought that was a moment to see exactly how will Miami respond. Will it be LeBron James just going off for himself, or will he have the type of game that even though he's scoring a lot of points, others are involved as well? So you got that in Brooklyn. I mean, he ties his career high. So, I think each round gives you something different. I think Miami has been prepared more for the series against Indiana as compared to Indiana being prepared more from a physical standpoint against the 2 teams they went through. Here it is. I think Miami had to fight a little bit more, and in the process of fighting, it's sometimes just the little things. And we've seen a productive Dwayne Wade. We've seen the ball moving. And when you have those types of series, it only encourages that when you go on the road. And I think going on the road for the Miami Heat right now is the best thing that they could have, Izzy, because it allows you not to rely on your fans, rely on the comfort of being at home. Now you guys have to take that bunker mentality and go in there on one accord, saying, you know, we know what we need to do. We're prepared. We've been through situations. Our mentality is fresh right now. And this is two teams, Izzy, that didn't necessarily go into the postseason, you know, on a high. So I think out of the two teams, Miami has done a better job of getting back to where we've been accustomed to talking about them.
You know, I'll tell you once. Well, you know what? Another challenge for Miami is going to be basically adjusting their lineup, because, you know, you just went through a series where you had Shane Battier as a starter to match up small with the Nets, and now you're probably going to go back to Udonis Haslem as a starter and have him match up with Roy Hibbert, and we'll see how that sort of transition affects that you know, the offense and the flow of the offense, because obviously with Shane Battier, he's going to be spotting up in the corner. With Udonis Haslem offensively, he's going to be about, you know, 5 or 6 feet closer to the basket, and will that sort of help Indiana in terms of protecting the paint and not being so stretched out? So, however, you could say that really he's playing the 5 spot, and Chris Bosh is going to be in that corner spotting up for 3. So they can probably find ways to adjust quickly and not, you know, suffer too much offensively in terms of a rhythm. But I'll tell you one guy to look at in terms of whether Miami's going to be having success offensively in this series, and that's going to be Ray Allen. In his 2 years with Miami, he struggled pretty mightily against the Indiana Pacers. Last year, he averaged just over 3 points, shot 11% from 3 in the regular season against Indiana. This year, not a heck of a lot better, 6.7 points, actually significantly better, but it's still not very good. 6.7 points, shot 37% from 3, and you know, it just wasn't that much of a factor except for maybe one of those games. So especially given the way he played in that Brooklyn series, if all of a sudden Ray Allen sort of is not nearly the same type of impact of player, then you're probably going to see Miami struggling offensively against Indiana, which won't be much of a surprise. It would be more so to keep the games close, because if Miami kind of is having any success offensively, it's going to be hard for Indiana to keep up. But it's going to be everything we all wanted to see. But, Bruce, if you were to pick, just one last thing, if you were going to pick sort of one key player for either team, not obviously LeBron James, Paul George, and the big names, but somebody like Ray Allen who could sort of stand out and make a difference in this series, who do you think that could be on either team?
I think it's Norris Cole from the Heat, and also Jan Mahinmi on Pacers, as far as what they bring to each group. I mean, Norris Cole, when he's knocking down shots, you see him really active defensively. He gets into guys, and he's an irritant out there on the wing. And so if you have him, you know, that he can give you positive minutes and knocking down shots, not trying to do too much, but we've seen him have big games, and he's capable of that. So I think he can be, as we can sort of call it, an X factor. And then on the flip side, Jan Mahinmi, because Jan can give you a little bit more of the athleticism and the movement down low, whereas when Roy Hibbert, if he gets into foul trouble or anything, we saw Jan really come into games and change the way the game was being played because of his energy and his effort. And it just wasn't on the scoring aspect, but it was the defensive aspect of what he was able to do.
That's a good one. I mean, Mahinmi is he's a guy that he's active, he's big. You're right, and he could be a problem, especially when they sort of exhale when Roy Hibbert leaves the floor, and then all of a sudden you've got this active, big body still to deal with. So that could be a really good situation. And you know what? Actually, you mentioned Norris Cole. Norris Cole actually went to LeBron and said, "Hey, I'm going to have a better series next one, I promise." So he didn't have he had a couple of decent moments against Brooklyn, but didn't have a very good series, and he's going to be very much motivated to be better in this one. So we'll see. It's actually going to be a good, interesting matchup between the backup point guards, Norris Cole and C.J. Watson. But let's move on to the Western Conference Finals.
I'm already worried about Tony Parker and all their great players. You have to guard them. The good thing about it, they're only allowed to play 5 at the same time. We are too. So both teams are really good. Both teams play hard. Both teams have great experience, so it's going to be a great series.
Oh, Scotty Brooks. Scotty Brooks. Like, you wonder why people make fun of you, man. You just gave us a 5. You just told us that they're only allowed to play 5 guys. Thanks for that one. You also just dropped that both teams are going to play hard. It's a remix of the Rasheed Wallace. Both teams have already played hard. So now that's just there's nothing there, and it's just kind of wonder what those huddles must be like with Scott Brooks, or maybe he's just trained to give the media absolutely nothing. But anyway, that was Scott Brooks, your head coach of the Oklahoma City Thunder, who all of a sudden look like maybe they're the favorites in this one. It's going to be interesting, Bruce, because we got 2 1 seeds that from the outside probably look like the underdogs, because Oklahoma City has beaten San Antonio 4 games in the regular season, and we all know how much that really matters when you look at Brooklyn and Miami and how quickly that one turned around. But it's not so much the regular season record as much as it is the style of play that bothers San Antonio. Oklahoma City does it well with athleticism and speed and shot making, and being able to overcome fundamental basketball by just being more dynamic athletically. The Houston Rockets did that for 4 wins against the San Antonio Spurs. Bruce, I need you to give Spurs fans confidence. Breathe some life into them. Make them feel like the favorites right now, even though I'm pretty sure Spurs fans themselves can talk them into feeling like favorites. But what do you have to say to those who doubt San Antonio in this one?
Well, I don't have much to say about the doubts, Izzy.
No.
It's not about, the same type of Miami, Brooklyn 4 loss. With the Spurs and with OKC, there's other things going on there. And I'm going to say 2 names that are so key. Or I'm not going to say 2, I'm going to say 3. And the first one is Reggie Jackson. He shot over 55% in the series against the San Antonio Spurs this season. Then you have Russell Westbrook and his attacking style, which puts pressure on the big men of San Antonio. And last but not least, you got the MVP, Kevin Durant. I watched during this series, when Kevin, he put so much pressure on either Tiago or Tim, when he comes off the screen, he can either pull up if Tim is playing off of him too much, or Tiago, or he goes by them using his length, getting to the basket. It's really going to be so important for the Spurs to really focus defensively. This is not Portland, and I don't think Portland necessarily. There are some things you can take away from the Houston series that you can apply to OKC, and that's the individual defense, and that's the effort, and you see what type of effort you need in order to really take a team out of what they want to do. Now you have to take that same mindset for Kawhi Leonard, going up against Kevin Durant. Kevin's going to have it's really a mismatch with anybody in it. You got to have a team concept to defend him. When he comes off of pick and rolls or catch and shoots, you really have to be attached to him. So the Spurs, they're going to be, even though they got home court advantage, they still have memory on their side. A couple of years ago where, they beat the OKC Thunder the first 2 games and they lose 4 in a row. Now, even though they had James Harden in, that was a different scenario. But you still have to deal with Russell Westbrook. You still have to deal with Kevin Durant. And I think this is more of a series, Izzy, that is really going to take San Antonio playing fantastic style of basketball in order to get victories. They cannot have a bunch of errors. You cannot afford to against this team. That's the only way I think that they're going to be able to get past OKC is if they play almost perfect basketball. Hey, Izzy, they got to play perfect basketball. How about that?
Just come up with that one on your own there, buddy. That was pretty good. Or maybe it wasn't. I'm not sure. Maybe. I'm kidding. Look, I got to ask you because, I don't think we're going to be able to expect Reggie Jackson to shoot 68%, the way he did in the regular season against San Antonio and give you 21 points and, 4.5 assists, 3 rebounds, and, a steal a game. So you're probably going to need more out of Russell Westbrook, more out of Kevin Durant. And how does San Antonio, what's the game plan against, let's say, a Russell Westbrook, for example? Because defensively, they don't really have to, mix it up the way Portland did because Russell Westbrook is long, he's athletic, he can do whatever the game plan is against Tony Parker. On the other side, though, like you mentioned, the attacking style of Russell Westbrook being a problem for them, what's the counter if you're San Antonio? Do you encourage him to shoot? Do you play that LeBron type of defense where you just back up and let him take as many jumpers as possible? That's the way they're going to go?
You said you hit the nail on the head. That's what I would think that Pop is thinking right now. We can't allow him to get into the paint. He can't get other people involved, because even when he misses, there's other people crashing the board. So I think you will see a lot of going under of pick and rolls. You'll see a lot of space, kind of like what we saw with LeBron James, just to kind of throw him off a little bit. Now, the thing is, will he bite on that, or will he settle for the jump shot? Now, if he's hitting the jump shot, I'm sure they're going to say, okay, we'll have to figure it out. But up until that point, I think that's part of it. And then he's going to have his hands full, on the offense, on the defensive side as well. But it's just Russell's motor is a lot different than the other point guard. I think, I would feel differently had Tony not gone down with a slight hamstring issue because of how many pick and rolls Tony comes off of. Russell doesn't like guarding a pick and roll with Tony Parker, because he knows that it's not just one, it's not just two, it might be three and even a fourth. So that's where Thabo Sefolosha, I think, they can afford to put Thabo on Tony Parker at that time and allow Tabo's long arms, to try to be a benefit to him as far as defending Tony.
Yeah, and then there's the other side of it where you've got Kevin Durant versus Kawhi Leonard, and as much as people want to respect Kawhi for his defense, and he's a phenomenal defender, he's not tall enough, he's not big enough to really be that much of a deterrent or that much of an annoyance for Kevin Durant, at least you would think. But then again, look what Tony Allen did to him. So I think that's going to be pretty key. However, given the last few games he's coming off of, I would anticipate his playoff points per game average is 32, and in his 4 games against San Antonio during the regular season, he only averaged 26.3. I say only. But I think you would anticipate it being closer to 32. But listen, Bruce, we're going to have Monday to talk about this series because it starts on Monday. We don't want to dive too much into it. You mentioned the Tony Parker injury. He's expected to be just fine for the Western Conference Finals, but you never really know how that's going to, could crop up again, especially given how much chasing he's going to have to do in what you anticipate to be a good series in terms of pace and a very fast offense on both sides. But for now, that's going to do it for this edition of the NBA Lockdown Podcast. For Bruce Bowen, I'm Israel Gutierrez. Conference Finals get started on Sunday. We will talk to you again on Monday.
Thanks for listening to the NBA Lockdown. For more great podcasts, visit the Pod Center page at ESPNradio.com.
For his birthday, I want to send my godson to a playoff game. With the 4-star rated Western Union app, I can send him money conveniently from anywhere and make sure it gets there by tip-off. WesternUnion.com is making things so simple nowadays, and right now, they've got a special promotion going on. Download the free Western Union mobile app, and if you're a new customer, you can send money for 0 fee by using the promo code 2014-2014.
One discount per transfer, no cash value, void where prohibited. This offer expires May 18th. Western Union also makes money from currency exchange.